my research. Okay, this is start. So I will define the community currency. Community currency can be defined as a type of complementary currency used by groups with common bonds for the aim of revitalizing local economies. In the literature, there is the most relevant paper that related to my research is the paper which related to eco-money. So here the volunteer activity, the eco-money was used to stimulate the volunteer activities among the citizens. So, but here for this method there is a problem. So Professor Nishibe proposed a new method by combining the non-commercial transactions with commercial transactions as shown here in this figure. So the more, this means that the more non-commercial transactions will stimulate the commercial transactions and vice versa. So for example, anyone who do the volunteer activity, he or she can receive the community currency in compensation for his or her efforts, and then the community currency will be used in the market. So if he or she is not interested in the market, this will cause slow down in the currency circulation, and then the stagnation problem will be occurred. So then, my research is to solve the stagnation problem to accelerate the currency circulation among the members of the community. So here I will state the main points of the purpose of my research. First, accelerate the currency circulation among the participants of the community to solve the stagnation problem. And then to develop a new criteria to accept participants in the community. So in this slide, I will talk about the main points behind the customized community. So to reinforce the cooperation among the members of the community, we should increase first the non-commercial transactions and then commercial transactions. And for the customized community, actually we cannot establish the customized community from the beginning. So we need some time to determine the most members who frequently engage in the transactions. And according to those members, we try to map their individual personal information to the sold community. So the customization concept can be performed by giving specific persons kind of a preference in terms of a premiums amount when they purchase the community currency by legal money. So here I will talk about the main the simulation environment and the assumption to perform the simulation. So here I assumed that there are 5 assumptions. I will explain later. And this simulation was performed by using Python, and I used a ratio of stagnations as a tool to evaluate the efficiency of the customized community. Okay, so here I will clarify a little bit about the simulation scenario. So let us assume that we have a virtual community and a virtual administrator, and the virtual community will buy, the member of the virtual community will buy the community currency by using their legal money, and then the members will perform the transactions among themselves as shown here. So allow me that the transaction between, for example, Mr. A and Mr. B, and so on and so forth. And also we assume that the simulation was lasted for 250 days, and I divided this period into 5 times, 50 days, 50 days, 50 days, 50 days, 50 days. Why I did so? Because I want to evaluate the stagnation here in each one of those stages, as shown here in this figure. Okay, so let us talk about the assumptions for doing the simulation. So I assumed here that every member in our community will have 10,000 units of community currency. And assumption number 2, I assumed that the price of the community was ranged from 50 to 10,000 and was generated randomly. And assumption number 3, I assumed also that the offered communities were belong to the same category, and the commodities, the price of the commodities were generated randomly, and I assumed that the commodities were purchased and sold as retailable. And assumption number 4, that related to the realization of the transaction. So here in this slide, in this research, sorry, I assume that the transaction will be realized when the price here, when the price of the commodity is less than the remaining initial amount of money. So if the buyer used up most of his or her initial amount of community currency, the remaining amount of community currency will be considered as a stagnation in this research. So this is the definition of the stagnation in the current research. Assumption number 5, here, if some members are in the community are not interested in the offered market, he or she will not use the money, and as a consequence, I consider this amount of money will be considered as stagnation. Okay, so here I will talk about the simulation of my current research. Let's assume that we have a virtual community, as shown here in this figure, 100 people, and each one of those 100 will have, will have 10,000 community currency, as shown here, each one. Also, the transactions among those members were visualized by using a transaction network, currency transaction network, as shown here. And then after that, I generate the urgency matrix to determine the couple of the seller and the buyer. So here, if there is a transaction between Mr. A and Mr. B, so here the corresponding location there is 1. If there is a transaction between Mr. A and Mr. C, so here the corresponding place will be 1. If there is no any transaction, for example, between A, Mr. A and G, so here will be 0. So this matrix was generated randomly for every 50 days, as I assumed in my simulation. Why I did so? Because I want to compute the participation rate for all the members within this period. And after that, I computed the entropy, the entropy color map for all the members within 50 days. This entropy color map was computed by using cloud channel equation. And after that, I tried to map the personal related information with the type of the commodity and the price in order to find why those people are interested in the market. So here in this research, I'm interested in the I assume that the good economy is the more participation rate the more participation those members are involved, the more activity will be occurred in the economy. So I assume that there are 6 groups in the simulation. The first one, non-stagnation group. So the participation rate was 100. So in my current study, I assume that the transaction will be occurred twice every day for 50 days. So this group will participate every day, and this group not every day, just one transaction within the 50 days, and 40%, 30%, 20%, and 10%. So then I computed the amount of stagnation for each group by using this equation. And after that, we could find that the amount of stagnation is shown here for 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, and 50. And after that, we computed the ratio of stagnation. So we found that the ratio was 15%. Of course, this is for our simulation data. Okay, so then I recomputed the ratio of stagnation for the subsequent stages as shown here. This is the total period of the simulation. So I computed the total stagnation. The total stagnation for each stage, and then I assumed that the initial amount of money at the beginning, at the first stage, was 10,000, and then I tried to compute the initial money for each stage here as shown in this figure, and then I tried to reduce the stagnation ratio in each stage in this figure. So to compute the initial money in the second stage, I used the initial money of the first stage plus the total stagnation, which is resulted in the first stage, divided by the number of the members who belong in the non-stagnation group. Okay, so in the same way, to determine the total the stagnation in the stage number 3, I use the initial money for the stagnation, initial money which is resulted in the stage number 2, plus the total stagnation resulted from the stage number 2 divided by the number of members who belong to the non-stagnation group, and so on and so forth. So those equations was computed by using this method. And here I will record the main results. So as shown here, that the ratio of stagnation was reduced from 15% to 3%, and in the same time we increased the initial amount of money from 10,000 to 17,000. Why this increase has been happening? Because we try to stimulate and attract the people to join the community. Okay. So as I told before, there is a private. We collect the personal information of the members. So this will arise a problem of the privacy. So here we try to solve this problem by setting up a privacy policy and term of use and asking the members to agree to change. Okay. So and after that, we want to report about the main difference between the main difference in the privacy policy between the community currency and the online internet markets. So the main difference between the community currency and the online market shown here. So first of all, there is a mutual financial benefit for people who belong to the community currency, because there is a premium for the seller and for the buyer, and the seller will increase his sales within the community. And of course, there is informational asymmetry. So usually in the internet market, anyone who wants to buy anything from the internet, he didn't read the privacy policy, so he just next, and okay without reading. But in the community currency, no, there's a briefing sessions and we can explain to them more accurately than internet market. And after that, after constructing the community, the customized community, and there is no need to collect the personal information for anyone who wants to join the community, because the market has been established, and as long as the stagnation ratio is small, so no need to collect the personal information as already done in the internet market. And the last one, of course, there is a less degree of anonymity in the community currency if you want to compare it with the online internet market. Okay, so here I will talk about the main implications of the customized community. So as I talked before, it will accelerate the currency circulation among the participants of the community currency. And here, if we want to apply the customized community, we will be able to introduce a new structure in the economy. So here in this research, the network of the transaction, the nodes of the network of transactions were considered as members, but if we want to apply the customized community, the nodes will be considered like as a community rather than individual as shown here. So this photo was taken from Denmark. It's interesting. I consider each circle here as a community, and if we apply the customized community in each circle, the non-commercial transaction will be increased, and at the same time, the commercial transaction will be increased as well. So this means that the development will be transferred from the local economy to the regional economy. So customization concept can be used as a bridge to transfer the development from the local economy to regional economy. Regional economy means here, this one, the red frame. Okay, so because the non-commercial and commercial transaction will be transferred from the sphere of local community to the sphere of the regional community. Okay. At last, I will talk about the main conclusions of my research. So, the ratio of stagnation was reduced from 15% to 3%, and also the difference in the privacy, the difference in terms of privacy between the community currency and the online internet market. And last, our future work is to use AI-based techniques. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Of course, now we have the start.
Okay.
So we still have 20 minutes.
Okay. So, any questions?
So, if there are any questions and comments, please raise your hands and say your opinions. Please.
I'm sorry, I came in very late and missed most of your talk, but I have a question. Are you concerned about imbalances between local economies?
Variances?
Imbalances? Like if I talk about current account deficits,
What kind of imbalances?
like trade deficits?
No. Here I assume that there is a market, there is a virtual community, and there is a member in this virtual community, and the members of those community are interested in a particular category of commodity. So I suggested to gather the members who have the common interest in one community and try to make, I call this community like customized, because I selected the members based on the community. So I try to accelerate the community currency among those members. So there is no any relationship between the customized community and the defects as you mentioned earlier. I don't know if there is any if I understand correctly what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
I have to read your paper.
Okay.
Do you have
The
a
more educated.
question? Do you have a follow-up question? No? It's
No,
okay?
yeah.
Yeah, so, next one.
Yeah.
Does each group have a product or service that they take pride in and is unique to that group?
In this simulation, I assume a category, for example, computer-related category, for example, like mouse, keyboard, and I assume anyone who is interested in this community, in this category, can join to the community, and after that, he or she should participate actively. Participate means the participation rate should be more and more comparing with others. If he or she participated frequently within the transactions, he will receive the premiums. Otherwise, no.
What are those
Premiums? Premiums is the stagnation, the community currency, the stagnation amount. Okay, so let me clarify a little bit, just a minute. Here, this is the premiums. So, for example, this is the total period of my simulation, 250 days. Okay. So the premiums for members who belong in the stage 2 is calculated by the initial amount in the stage number 1 plus the stagnation, which was computed in stage number 1, divided by all the numbers who in the non-stagnation group. So, in easy in easy words, the premiums means the stagnation amount from the previous stage, computed and divided by all the persons who participated actively in the network. Okay? Yeah.
To put you on the spot a little bit, I work on a complementary currency where we have business and individual users. And in order to make it as appealing as possible for businesses, and because they tend to be the accumulators, earning large amounts of Calgary dollars, when a business joins, they get 100 Calgary dollars automatically, as opposed to individuals, which get a far smaller amount. And the businesses now have the opportunity that when they receive Canadian dollars, national currency, they can give out as a customer reward 10% of that value in Calgary dollars that comes from the system. That's designed as a counter stagnation and incentive for business involvement. Do you have any context with that or any opinion?
No, no. Actually, yes. It's to some extent it's similar to what I did, but in my case, there is like, how to say, I collect the personal information and try to map the personal information with the first of all, I compute the network of a transaction, and then I try to look for where the people are more interested within this network. And after that, I try to map their personal information with the commodity. And after that, give them kind of premiums to establish a new community to accelerate, because they are already interested in the market, right?
Yeah.
So I try to accelerate the currency among them by giving them more premiums, and try to avoid people who are not interested in the market by giving the amounts to those people. And of course, there is like terms of use who wants to belong to the community in advance.
That's very valuable for complementary
Yeah.
currencies like ours.
I think so, yeah.
Are there any questions, comments? Still more time. 2 minutes. Okay, so,
Okay.
yeah, we're finished. I'm talking about right money. This sounds very ridiculous. This is a kind of just idea at the moment. And to be honest, I'm not completely confident about the contents of the paper. So this is a provisional, I say. But the basic concept was 10 years ago. I took that idea, and then I've been trying to make it a paper, but I couldn't. So this time, anyway, I give it a try. Three-dimensional digital money that can express uniqueness and diversity of value beyond breadth. So I cannot really describe the detail about very technical things, but today I would like to talk about the basic idea. So in comments and criticism, very welcome. Okay. The contents is here. I just finished the full paper, but I know this is not good as an academic paper. This is just something like still essays or something. The contents. Okay. I wrote several papers on evolutionary institutional design. My major is evolutionary economics, and so from the viewpoint of evolutionary economics, I'm insisting the new kind of institutional design. So I could adject it evolution. Evolutionary institutional design of money means changing the way money means a breakthrough in overcoming many problems in not only economic but also the social and culture, especially caused by the free investment in globalization. I talk about the globalization and free investment in the my keynote speech in the morning, but I didn't talk about anything about completely. Now I try to do it how I'm thinking to solve it. Among commodity currency, red is the most general form as integral to communication medium of money and language. and has a significant potential to solve the problem of globalization and create alternative socio-economic markets independent of the capitalist market. Around 2000, I wrote on the LETS, the paper, not academic, but it's more like essay in the movement. So I found the LETS is most potential medium within the many kinds of global currencies. I'd like to explain first why I have think about it. So, okay, so the LETS can have very potential to solve the problem globalization and create alternative socio-economic market independent of the capitalist market. However, conventional money, including debts, is scalar money to evaluate things only quantitatively with one dimension, so that it might have the effect of monochrome detection of everything, black and white, and everything is in between white and black, actually in gray. So, so research conducted thought experiments on light color money with 3 dimension as RGB or CNY or B, CNYB, color or light color. So as to qualitatively evaluate not only products and services, including volunteer activity and shadow work, but also social and natural environment and resources more diversity by using digital technique, not just analog ones. The several properties of light money currency derived from the rule of complementary tasks are, I think, unique. So there is a large potential to use it to make our social economy non-capitalistic, sustainable, and diverse. And because this is not difficult to implement light color money in an ICT environment, it is worth to carry out the social experiment to test its feasibility and applicability. Okay. So what about the scalar money and vector money? Scalar money is the money we use as yen, dollars, euros. Everything is just quantity. 1,000 yen is 10 times of 100 yen, and so on. And 10,000 yen is more than 999 yen, and so on. Okay? But what is, so I call it scalar money. Scalar is a mathematical word. Say the number, right? And we have 0, plus and minus. This is scalar. And then the vector is something like 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional, or more dimensional money. So the scalar is the strings. And the vector is not just the strings. Strings has magnitude and length, but the scalar has the algorithm. So it has directions. So even though the same length, but if the direction is different, so these are different vectors. So we cannot really measure which one is bigger. Okay, the capitalist market economy is the economy, scalar money is dominantly used, one-dimensional. Distributed network of buying and selling is also facilitated. So omnipresence of capital by globalization, finalization takes place. And we saw the frequent speculative bubbles, unemployment and economic disparity, collapse of community and the ethics. It causes many kinds of problem, I think. As a PhD student, I wrote on the socialist calculation debate, and I published a book in 1996 in Japanese. It was more than 20 years ago. So my initial starting point was the socialist calculation debate. When I studied on the socialist calculation debate, the socialist economic planning was untenable. It was not feasible. It's something like no money and concentrated information to make a concentrated planning, just like Soviet Union type planning. And it also has a calculation complexity. If we have a limit of ability to calculate as a human being, even though the central planners gather a lot of information, it cannot really calculate the efficient equilibrium prices as general equilibrium price, general equilibrium theory insists. So the information and the problem of information concentration and calculation complexity and elementary rationality and creativity in a predicate. So I suppose the socialist economic system was intended to overcome the defects of capitalist systems, but it failed because of that kind of a problem. And then it was actually shown as a demise of the socialist economic system. So I don't want to try to abolish money. So the thing is, I'm trying to see the change the money. If we try to abolish the money, something tragic happens. So that's what I have had in my mind since 20 years ago. Okay, so that's why I'm thinking something like this. The change of institution design of money from scalar to vector can be facilitated by ICT on the internet and smartphone. Maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this kind of idea is just fantasy. It cannot be realized. But now, if we set up the technology, I think it can realize. So is the emergence of non-capitalist market economy based on private property and free market result only presence of capital possible? So I want to say possible, but it's still not so easy. So I'm still thinking in order to do so, we need to have the diversity of value, cooperation and commons and exchange and division of labor. Such kind of diversity should be necessary, I suppose. In the morning, I didn't show what the globalization is, I think. And this is a very simple version of it. We have three principles: market, community, states. This comes from the Polanyi theology, I think. The market means exchange. The commodity means reciprocity. The state means redistribution. And the market is private and freedom. And community is common and fraternity. The state is parity, equality. So I think this is actually the three colors, tricolor of the French flag, which come from the French Revolution, I suppose. So that's a political, principle, but now I think this is a socio-economical principle, according to Polanyi, and I'm taking it. Globalization means that the market expands, but on the other hand, the community and state shrink. This is not geographically or not just the scale, but the market comes in our mind because we are thinking everything from the market mentalities and so on. So this is globalization. So now we are all something like investors, even though you don't think you're investors. But if you are, the student, you put human capital to accumulate human capital, more or less. And if you're a housewife, you put a lot of, shadow work, but you don't want to be working, free of charge, like you think. So you want to go outside to get a salary or, part-time jobs. And you are trying to compare the hours, the shadow work in the family with the working outside. So you want to save the hours within the community. Then you try to go out. So that's the kind of, I say, free investment sentiment. So anyway, this is all come about. I think the money is one-dimensional measures. But I understand the human being needs some kind of very simplicity measures to measures. So if we teach economics, money has three major functions. The first one is measure of value. Measure of value means usually one-dimensional measurement. And the second is means of exchange. And the third one is the store of value. So usually the local currencies doesn't have 5 minutes. Usually doesn't have a store of values, but needs to have a value, measure of value. So, okay, let me see. So the light color is expressed as a three-dimensional vector. Okay, so I will tell you the later on. Now I'm thinking of light and colors. Light and color is very similar, but when you look at the light and color, it's different. Newton tried to make an experimental prism to differentiate the white colors to the rainbow colors. So, and the colors is actually the reflection of light to our eyes, and then we recognize the colors. So I'm talking about the difference. Okay, let me explain the red system. Why red system? I know that everybody is familiar with the red, right? Everybody starts from zero account, and then if you offer something, you can get the plus, and then if you offer something, your account could be minus, and so on. So if you have three transactions among the participants, David, Cassie, and Mary, computer lessons is 4 plugin, and look prepared. So the David account would be plus 200, Cassie minus 900, Mary plus 700, and summation of all accounts amount to 0. So this is a zero-sum principle. So this means that microscopically the money seems to exist, but the macroscopically there is no money in reds in this sense. So the money, macroscopic money, is just recording information, plus or minus. So this means that IOC, if you have a plus, if you have a minus, it means the Michael Linton says the minus account means commitment to meaning, right? So I said it's IOC, I mean IO committee, not IOU. Usually in a financial instrument, the IOU is usually used. IOU from bank or from somebody, but not here. Not just from the one person or one organization. The collection of people. That's a agreement, right? So if you have 500 plus, you don't have any, let's say, asset with some particular person. You just have that kind of asset from a community. So you're lending community 500. And if you have minus, you are borrowing the minus from the community. So this is very basic but important concept of this, and then I am fascinated by. This is something different, but the same thing, different expression. The network of pay forward. The paper means if I borrow the money, I pay back to somebody. This is IOU. But pay forward is something else. If I borrow from someone, I don't have necessarily to get back to the person. I can pay forward to somebody else, the third person. Okay, fine. So this is IOU. So I think the red is this kind of things. Another one is multi-debt. And if you have many debts, so you belong to many kind of debts at the time. If you are D and another one is D and B, so you can make transactions in REDS, charity and REDS good, and so on. And this is a kind of multi association or multi contribution belonging systems. So once you belong to many REDS, you can express yourself as many kinds of REDS. This is good things, but I'm not confident. This is enough to go beyond capitalism. I'm not very sure. So that's why I'm thinking of multi-dimensional money. This is also one dimension. The three primary color of the light and the three primary color of the color. Left, we have a red, green, blue. This is very familiar. Okay. The light, the left. Yellow, cyan, magenta, yellow. So this makes the light color money is RGB and CWQ. So this is something like, say, in 8-bit, maybe white is expressed 255, 255, 255. The black is expressed in 000. And red is expressed at 255, 000, and so on. So this kind of expression of money is multidimensional. What does it mean? It means quantity doesn't matter anymore. Quality matters. So if you are maybe a 10 millionaire player in the baseball, professional players, and then if you are a number worker, the salary is maybe 100,000 times. So somebody say that a baseball player is very rich and great, but you are not. But here we cannot do that kind of comparison anymore. So everybody has unique combination of colors and then exchange the colors. This is a basic idea. The last one is Adam Smith's water diamond paradox. He said water is very useful, but no economic exchange value. The diamond doesn't have any use value. But once, usually, the introducing the scarcity, the diamond is very high prices, but water is not. But if we have multi-dimensions, we can have different solutions. Maybe the diamond has a high scarcity, but no use. So maybe it can be expressed 0,000, but water is expressed 1,000 to 0. So different vectors cannot be compared. So these are two different things in commerciability. Okay, thank you. This is the idea. Any question and comments? And Chris, please.
Can you explain us the formula for calculating the third-dimensional money? The slide with the cube. Okay, this one. I think WB is an exchange rate, or no?
We cannot set any exchange rate between among the different vertical line. So there is no exchange. That's the point. If we have the exchange rate with exchange rate of red coin and blue coin and 3-dimension should break.
Okay, no exchange.
No exchange.
Okay.
But yes, no exchange. At least no official exchange.
I see.
Private exchange might happen.
Coefficients W, what does it mean?
What?
The last formula, coefficients W, what is it? What does it mean?
Yeah, it doesn't say anything, right? The W means
I say they are normalized, but
subjective weight.
weight. Okay.
Yeah, subjective weight. So the weight should be different to individual, and then the vectors. So I wanted to say, the subjective evaluation of light or color money should be different, even though the same vectors. If you like lead, you like really lead, so your weight of lead is very high, so you like lead. But other people don't like lead. So what is red, what is blue, what is green? So that's the program. I provisionally explain in the papers, green may be ecological values, and then, green, right? So the blue means scarcities, and the red means labor. So in classical economics, 3 primary factors used to be the labor, capital, and rent. So we have main 2 different type of theory of value, the labor theory of value and utility theory of value. But here I'm talking about not the value theory. This is let's say the dimensional, multi-dimensional money theory. So this is different. So 3-dimension, I don't want to say which is which because I cannot really determine which is which. Maybe it can be spontaneously determined by an exchange of the people. So maybe we start from, okay, just a minute. We start from some kind of set of value, but should be changing in the process. Please. Yeah, okay.
Christophe Place, Minister of Lancaster and Cumbria. So if I understood well, what you are saying is that each LETS system are invited to agree on their interoperability between them. This is what you're saying through your light color 3-dimensional vector. This is what you're saying, like instead of imposing a specific exchange rate, each LETS system should agree between them, and at the end they will have a big agreement between the multidimensional LETS. This is what you're saying, right? Am I
In
correct?
the fundamental principle is the summation of all account amount to zero. This is a zero sum
Yeah.
principle. I think this is a very basic concept.
Mhm.
But in the light and color money, I didn't have much time to explain, but a complementary color principle is very important. How can I say? Here, red and complementary color of red is cyan. So if you add the red and cyan, you get the white. And also, if you have a green, and then the magenta is a complementary currency. So if you give it the green, your account green coin should be decreased, but on the other hand, it can be expressed, you can have red and blue. Red and blue increase means mixture of red and blue is magenta. So it's a kind of minus, but this is not the minus expression. That's kind of adding and abstraction rules.
Within the LED system or between different LED systems?
This is completely different from the LED system. I think this is beyond.
All right.
Okay. Yes.
Interesting things that come to my mind when I see your presentation are, if I think about maths and how maths started to grow from geometry and how algebra has taken over maths. So geometrical approaches of using space to approach the world have faded away with the idea of we should use numbers and figures. And this, to me, seems similar to this, looking another way at the world, looking in a more qualitative way. And I think, I'll just finish this.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that this has got some parallels with social sciences, where people have used things like Likert scales to try and convert value and feelings into more scalar systems. And they never work. They're always an approximation. And I think that's what you've captured with this slide. And I wondered if you thought about some application cases. I wondered about learning. When you, in a learning situation like this, we're doing also informal and informal learning, where you have to have both together, you can't have them separate. And if you thought about some application cases.
Yeah, we have ended novels. In the novels, they have the Glayman. Glayman is a kind of monocolor wall. But initially they have a colorful wall, but gray man comes in, and then the wall becomes gray. So that's why I, so this kind of things is invented or introduced. Anyway, so we need to have some experiment. Maybe adults can really use it, but the child or children can easily use it. So I want to make an experiment with children. Okay, thank you very much.